Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Secrets channel. Tonight we step quietly into a medieval town, just as winter closes in around you. You are standing outside the walls, breath fogging the air, boots already stiff from frost, while the last colours of autumn drain away from the fields. The gate creaks open slowly, not out of welcome, but necessity. Winter is coming whether the town is ready or not, and now that you are here, you are very much part of the problem it has to solve. You probably will not survive this, at least not comfortably, not without luck, neighbours, and a fair amount of endurance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are settling in, maybe leave a comment with where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. Somewhere, someone else is drifting off under a different sky. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders drop, and imagine the sound of the town gates shutting behind you. It is not dramatic, no trumpet, no ceremony, just the heavy thud of wood meeting wood, iron sliding into place. That sound means safety, but it also means limits. Once winter truly sets in, these gates will open less often, travel slows, trade thins. News from the outside world arrives late, if at all. You feel it immediately. The town feels smaller now, tighter, like a held breath. You walk forward along a narrow street where the ground is already slick with mud turning to ice. Snow has not fully arrived yet, but the cold has claimed the air. Smoke hangs low, trapped between rooftops, carrying the smell of burning wood, old straw, and something faintly sour. This is the smell of winter survival. It will cling to your clothes, your hair, your memory. Medieval towns did not shut down for winter, but they did contract. This is one of those solid historical facts that shows up again and again in records. Councils met less often, markets shortened their hours, and travel permits became harder to obtain once cold weather made roads dangerous. Winter was not just a season, it was a condition that narrowed life. As you move deeper into town, you notice how people walk differently now. Heads down, arms tucked close. Everyone seems to be counting something in their mind. Firewood left, grain stored, days until the next feast day. There is an unspoken arithmetic happening everywhere, and you have just joined it. A quirky little detail you might not expect is that some medieval towns officially marked the start of winter, not by snow, but by sound. In a few places, special bells were rung when cold weather rules came into effect, signaling earlier curfews or the closing of certain gates at dusk. Winter had a noise, and once you heard it, you knew your freedom had shrunk. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced winter as a time of dread or simply as a familiar rhythm, something harsh but expected. The truth, as always, likely sits somewhere in between. You feel both things at once. There is fear here, but also routine. People have done this before. Their parents did. Their grandparents too. That knowledge is a thin but real comfort. You pass a cart piled high with firewood, the driver arguing with a customer about price. Wood always gets more expensive now. Everyone knows it. Some towns even tried to regulate firewood prices in winter, but enforcement was spotty, and shortages had a way of ignoring laws. You catch yourself staring at the cart longer than you should. Already, warmth has become currency in your mind. The buildings press close together. This is not accidental. Medieval towns grew inward, not outward, and winter made that density feel almost protective. Shared walls meant shared heat. Narrow streets blocked wind. You brush past a stranger and feel the surprising warmth radiating through layers of wool. No one apologizes. In winter, closeness is practical. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks, sharp and sudden. It echoes between stone walls, then fades. Sound carries strangely in cold air. Footsteps seem louder. Voices feel brittle. You hear a laugh spill out of a doorway, followed by the warm smell of stew, and for a moment, your body leans toward it before your mind catches up. Not every door opens for you in winter. Hospitality exists, but it is selective. There is another quiet reality check settling in now. Once the ground freezes, there is no easy escape. If you run out of food, fuel, or favor, winter does not forgive you. Medieval records are full of winter deaths, though rarely dramatic. People simply weaken, fall ill, or disappear from tax lists come spring. You do not think about that too hard. You focus on putting one foot in front of the other. You reach the center of town, where the market square looks strangely empty. A few stalls remain, bundled in canvas and straw, but most traders have already packed away anything that cannot survive frost. The space feels larger without the usual noise. Winter steals sound as much as it steals color. Above you, the sky is already darkening, even though it does not feel late. Short days are another fact of winter life that medieval people understood intimately. Candles and lamps cost money. Darkness changes behavior. Soon, you will be indoors not because you want to be, but because light itself has become scarce. As you stand there, cold seeping slowly through your boots, you realize something important. Winter, in a medieval town, is not an event. It is a long negotiation between people and weather, between hunger and planning, between fear and habit. You have just arrived at the opening argument, and the town has already been preparing its response for months. You pull your cloak tighter, take one more breath of smoky air, and step toward whatever shelter you can find. The gates are closed. Winter is inside with you now. You wake to the smell before you wake to the cold. It seeps into your sleep, thick and layered, like a blanket you cannot shake off. Smoke is the loudest note, wood smoke that has been burning slowly all night, mixed with damp wool drying near a hearth and the faint rot of yesterday's scraps. This is the winter smell of a medieval town, and once you recognize it, you will never forget it. You sit up, your breath puffing visibly in the dim room. The air is not freezing, not yet, but it bites gently at your nose and fingers. Somewhere nearby, someone is already stirring a fire back to life. You hear the scrape of iron on stone, then a soft cough as smoke finds a new path upward. Chimneys exist, but they are crude. Smoke often lingers, especially in winter, when cold air presses it downward. Your eyes sting slightly. You blink and adjust. Outside, the street has its own scent. You step into it cautiously, pulling your cloak tighter, and the smells layer themselves again. Animal waste frozen into the mud gives off a sharp tang. Old cabbage leaves, trampled and half-buried, release something sour. Ale from a nearby tavern, spilled and stale, adds a yeasty sweetness. None of it is pleasant, but all of it is familiar to the people around you. Winter does not clean the town. It preserves it. One mainstream historical fact stands out here. Medieval towns rarely had organized waste removal, especially in winter. Garbage that might be carted away in warmer months often stayed put once roads iced over. The result was a concentrated smellscape that grew stronger as the season dragged on. You are not imagining it. Winter really does make everything smell more intense. As you walk, you notice how people respond to these smells differently now. No one wrinkles their nose dramatically. No one comments. Instead, they adjust routes subtly, stepping around known patches, avoiding doorways where something unpleasant collects. Knowledge of smell is local knowledge. You are still learning the map. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind as you pass a row of houses with shutters tightly closed. Some medieval people believed that bad smells carried disease itself, not just filth. This idea was not entirely wrong by pre-modern standards, but it led to interesting behavior. People burned herbs, pitch, or even old shoes in winter to mask odors, believing the smoke would protect them. The result was often worse. Not better, but intention mattered. You catch a whiff of something sharper and oddly comforting. Onions frying in animal fat. Someone is already cooking, early and deliberately. Winter meals tend to start sooner in the day, partly because daylight is limited, and partly because warmth from cooking is precious. You feel your stomach respond immediately. Smell becomes appetite faster in cold weather. Historians still debate how much medieval townspeople actually noticed seasonal changes in smell, or whether modern noses are simply less accustomed to constant background odors. Some argue that winter would have been overwhelming. Others suggest it faded into the mental background, like traffic noise does for you today. Standing here, breathing it in, you suspect both are true. The smell is strong, but after a few minutes, your mind stops shouting about it. You pass a tannery near the edge of town, and the smell shifts dramatically. Sharp, acrid, almost metallic. Tanneries were often pushed to the outskirts for this reason, but winter air carries their scent farther than intended. It clings to your clothes instantly. You make a face, then realize no one else does. They are used to this. Winter forces you to accept what cannot be changed. Sound and smell intertwine. A cart creaks past, its wheels stiff with cold. carrying something wrapped in cloth that smells faintly of salt and meat. Preserved food. Winter food. The scent tells you as much as the shape does. Freshness is rare now. Everything smells older, heavier, more deliberate. You notice your own body contributing to the town's winter perfume. Wool damp from breath and sweat, leather boots holding yesterday's mud, hair unwashed longer than usual. Bathing in winter is risky and uncommon. Cold water can shock the body, and heating enough water takes fuel better used elsewhere. Cleanliness becomes relative. You stop thinking of dirt as something to remove and start thinking of it as something to manage. There is comfort in certain smells too. Beeswax candles, when you encounter them, give off a soft sweetness that feels almost luxurious. Most people rely on tallow, which smells animal and smoky, but wax appears in churches and wealthier homes. When you catch that scent drifting from a doorway, you slow down, savoring it without quite knowing why. A sudden gust of wind cuts through the street, rearranging the air. For a moment, everything smells like snow, even though none has fallen yet. Cold has a smell of its own, or maybe it is just the absence of everything else. It feels clean, sharp, temporary. You breathe it in deeply, then the smoke settles back down, and winter reality resumes. Someone nearby laughs, then coughs. The sound rough and familiar. Winter coughs echo everywhere. Smoke inhalation, damp air, and close quarters make breathing harder. You file that away without dwelling on it. Worry does not keep you warm. You turn down a narrower lane where houses lean so close together their upper floors nearly touch. Here, the smell is warmer, human. Stew, bread, wet wool, and bodies sharing space. You feel strangely safe. Winter pushes life inward, and these smells tell you people are surviving together. As you walk, you realize something quietly important. Smell is not just background here, it is information. It tells you where food is, where danger is, where people gather, and where to avoid. In winter, when vision fades early and sound carries oddly, your nose becomes a guide whether you like it or not. You pause, listening to the muffled sounds of the town settling into its shortened day. Somewhere, a door closes. Somewhere else, a fire catches. The air shifts again. You are beginning to belong to this place, not because it welcomes you, but because it surrounds you completely. The winter smell of the medieval town wraps around you like an old cloak, heavy, imperfect, and unavoidable. You pull it closer, breathe slowly, and keep walking. You push open a door and step into a medieval home, and the change is immediate. The cold does not disappear, but it softens, blunted by thick walls and stale warmth that has been trapped overnight. The ceiling hangs low enough that you instinctively duck your head. Space is precious here, and nothing is built larger than it needs to be. The room smells of smoke and old heat. A hearth sits at the center or against one wall, depending on the house, its embers glowing faintly like a tired eye. Someone has banked the fire carefully, covering it with ash so it would survive until morning. This is a small victory. Relighting a fire from scratch costs time, fuel, and effort that no one wants to spend twice in winter. You look around and realize how little separation exists between functions of life. Cooking, sleeping, working, eating, all of it happens here, in one shared volume of air. Medieval houses in towns were often long and narrow, especially for ordinary people, with the goal of keeping heat close and movement minimal. Large open spaces look impressive, but they bleed warmth. These homes are designed to hold onto every scrap of it. Your feet feel the floor first. Packed earth, maybe covered with rushes or straw. In winter, fresh rushes are harder to come by, so old ones stay down longer than anyone would like. They absorb spills, dirt, and whatever else falls during daily life. Over time, they develop a smell all their own, earthy and slightly sour. You notice it, then stop noticing it. Adaptation happens quickly when comfort depends on it. There is a bed, if you can call it that. A wooden frame or simply a raised platform, piled with straw mattresses and heavy wool blankets. In winter, bedding becomes the most valuable furniture in the house. People add layers the way you add insulation to walls. Blankets are patched, shared, and guarded carefully. Losing one to damp or pests can mean weeks of poor sleep. One thing that surprises you is how few windows there are. When they exist, they are small, often shuttered, sometimes covered with oiled cloth or thin horn instead of glass. Glass is expensive and fragile. Openings invite cold, Light is sacrificed willingly in exchange for warmth. You feel the dimness press in, but you also feel the stillness. Wind cannot reach you here. From surviving building remains and written descriptions, we know that medieval townhouses were often rebuilt again and again on the same footprint. Winter damage, fires, and rot forced constant repair, but the basic design stayed consistent because it worked. Thick walls, shared boundaries, and minimal exposure kept people alive. Comfort, as you would define it, was not the priority. Endurance was. There is an odd little belief attached to winter homes that surfaces in some records and folklore. Many people thought drafts were dangerous, not just uncomfortable. Cold moving air was believed to weaken the body directly, slipping into bones and joints. This fear shaped how homes were sealed in winter, with cloth stuffed into cracks and doors hung with extra coverings. You notice a rolled blanket wedged along the base of the door, and suddenly understand why it is there. You sit, or crouch, or perch on the edge of something that serves as seating. Chairs exist, but not for everyone. Benches, chests, and beds do double duty. Wood feels cold at first, then slowly warms beneath you. Heat moves reluctantly in winter, but it does move. Somewhere above or beside you, you hear movement. Many townhouses rise vertically, with families stacked over shops or workshops. Heat from lower levels drifts upward, making higher floors slightly more desirable in winter despite the climb. You imagine someone above you shifting in their sleep, straw rustling, the sound muted by layers of wood and habit. There is debate among historians about how private medieval people expected their homes to be, especially in winter. Some argue that constant closeness was simply normal, that privacy as a concept mattered less. Others point to complaints and regulations, suggesting people craved separation but could not afford it. Sitting here, you feel the tension between necessity and desire. Warmth requires proximity, but proximity comes at a cost. You notice how the hearth defines the room. Everything angles toward it. Tools lean nearby. Cooking vessels wait within reach. Even the way people sit and sleep follows its gravity. Fire is not decoration. It is the heart of the house, literally and emotionally. In winter, families schedule their lives around it, rising when it is fed, settling when it dies down. A faint drip catches your ear. Condensation forms on cold surfaces where warm breath meets stone or wood. Over time, this moisture seeps into walls and floors, making winter homes damp as well as cold. People fight this with constant fire, but fuel is finite. You feel the chill creep up from below and pull your feet closer to the heat without thinking. Personal belongings are few but purposeful. A chest holds clothing, tools, maybe a little food. Keeping items close reduces movement and exposure. You realize that winter living shrinks not just space, but intention. Everything unnecessary fades away. There is comfort here too, though it is subtle. The quiet feels protective. Outside sounds are muffled. The walls hold you. You understand why people dreaded leaving their homes once darkness fell. Inside, you have some control. Outside, winter owns everything. You imagine a family settling in for the night. The fire banked low, everyone layered together under blankets, breath rising and falling in a shared rhythm. It is not romantic, but it is effective. Survival often is. As you prepare to move again, you glance back at the hearth, memorizing its glow. You will measure many winter moments against this feeling. Dim, enclosed, warm enough. You step back toward the door, knowing that every medieval home you enter this season will echo these same choices, built not for beauty, but for staying alive. The fire greets you before anyone else does. You feel it on your face as soon as you cross the threshold again, a gentle push of warmth that fades quickly when you move too far from the hearth. In winter, fire is never taken for granted. It is watched, fed, argued over, and quietly feared. You crouch near the hearth and hold your hands out, fingers stiff and pink. The flames are modest, nothing like the roaring fireplaces you might imagine. Medieval fires are controlled, restrained, designed to last rather than impress. Too large, and you waste fuel. Too small, and the cold creeps back in, relentless and patient. Wood is the most common fuel here, and its quality matters deeply. Hardwoods burn longer and hotter, but they are harder to come by and more expensive. Softwoods catch quickly but disappear fast, leaving ash and frustration behind. You learn to recognize the difference by smell and sound. A good log settles into the fire with a low, steady crackle. A poor one hisses and pops, throwing sparks you do not want. Keeping a hearth alive through winter is a daily calculation. How much wood do you have left? How cold will tonight be? How many people need to stay warm? Records from medieval towns show that fuel shortages were a real and recurring concern, especially during long winters or after wet summers that left wood poorly dried. Firewood theft appears regularly in court rolls, not always punished harshly, because everyone understood the stakes. There is a quieter anxiety beneath all of this. Fire warms you, cooks your food, and lights your evenings, but it can also destroy everything you own. Towns burned often, especially in winter when fires were kept going constantly and buildings sat close together. You notice how hearths are surrounded by stone or packed clay, small attempts at control in a world that accepts risk as normal. A curious practice emerges in winter months. Many households kept embers alive overnight, carefully buried in ash, because starting a fire from scratch was labor-intensive and uncertain. Matches do not exist. Fire is coaxed into being with flint, steel, and patience. Losing a fire completely on a bitter morning could mean hours of cold before warmth returned. You watch someone stir the ash gently, relief visible when a glow answers back. People talk about fire the way you might talk about weather forecasts. Casual, but attentive. How long will this wood last? Did you hear that the price went up again? Someone down the street ran out last week. These conversations drift through winter evenings, half complaint, half planning. There is an odd belief you hear repeated quietly. Some people think fire itself has moods. A stubborn hearth means bad luck or poor household harmony. A lively flame is taken as a good sign. These ideas are not universal, but they persist, especially when winter pushes nerves thin. When so much depends on heat, it is easy to assign personality to it. Scholars have not fully agreed on how evenly fuel scarcity affected medieval towns. Some argue that urban centers, with access to trade, fared better than isolated villages. Others point out that demand inside town walls could be even higher, driving prices beyond what the poor could manage. Standing here, feeling how quickly warmth fades when you step back, you suspect inequality was felt sharply, even if quietly. You notice how fire shapes daily rhythm. Meals are timed to when the hearth is strongest. Work is done close by. Tools are warmed before use. Because cold metal bites, children are kept near the fire when possible, both for warmth and watchfulness. Firelight becomes the boundary of the day. When it dims, so does activity. The smell of burning wood clings to everything: hair, clothing, skin. In winter, everyone smells faintly of smoke. It marks you as part of the town. Outsiders notice it immediately. You stop thinking of it as dirty and start thinking of it as proof that you have stayed warm. Ash builds up quickly. Someone has to remove it, carry it out, dump it somewhere appropriate. In winter, ash can be reused to insulate embers or even spread on icy paths for traction. Nothing is wasted. You watch ash being scraped carefully into a container and realize how practiced the movement is. This is not a chore. It is survival maintenance. Fire also changes social behavior. People gather where it is strongest. Disputes soften or sharpen depending on who controls it. In shared households, arguments over fuel can simmer quietly for weeks. Who used too much? Who left the fire too high? Winter magnifies small tensions because resources are limited and consequences immediate. There is an unspoken rule you learn quickly. You do not leave a fire unattended for long. Even stepping outside requires a glance back, a mental note of flame height and ember spread. This vigilance is tiring, but it becomes automatic. You begin to understand why winter feels exhausting even when work slows. Worry burns energy of its own. At night, when the fire is banked low and the room darkens, you feel the cold return inch by inch. It starts at the floor, climbs your legs, settles in your back. You pull closer to others without comment. Shared warmth is part of fire management too. Bodies supplement fuel. No one jokes about it. It is simply how things are done. Looking into the embers, you feel time stretch. Winter nights are long. Firelight flickers slowly, shadows moving like thoughts you do not chase. You listen to the soft crack of wood, the occasional sigh of someone shifting nearby. Outside, the town is quieter now. Fires glowing behind many walls, each one a small island of heat in a sea of cold. You understand something fundamental in this moment. Fire is not comfort in the modern sense, it is permission to continue. As long as it burns, life does too. When it fails, everything else follows. You add another piece of wood carefully, watching how the flames respond. The room warms just a little more. Enough. For now, that is all winter ever promises. You dress slowly, not because you are careful, but because every layer matters. Clothing in a medieval winter is not about style or self-expression. It is about building a barrier between your body and the cold air that wants to take its place. You learn this quickly as you pull wool over linen, then more wool over that, each piece adding weight and reassurance. The base layer is simple linen, rough but familiar against your skin. Linen does not keep you warm by itself, but it protects outer layers from sweat and grime. Over it comes wool, thick and scratchy, but unmatched for holding heat even when damp. Wool is the quiet hero of medieval winter life. It traps air, resists moisture, and lasts for years if cared for. There is a reason sheep matter so much to these towns. You tug on hose, adjusting them carefully. They are tied, not elastic, secured with cords that can loosen as the day goes on. Cold fingers make this harder than it should be. You feel a flash of irritation, then let it go. Winter teaches patience, whether you want it to or not. What surprises you most is how rarely people are truly alone under their layers. Cloaks overlap, sleeves brush, bodies lean closer at every opportunity. In a cold town, warmth is shared almost unconsciously. You sit near someone at the fire and feel heat radiating not just from the flames, but from their shoulder through layers of cloth. It is intimate, but not personal. Winter normalizes closeness. Written accounts and surviving garments show that most people owned only a few sets of clothing, adjusted seasonally with added layers rather than replaced entirely. Winter meant wearing everything you had, often at once. Repairs happened constantly. Patches overlapped older patches. Beauty lay in usefulness. A well-worn cloak told a story of seasons survived. There is a curious detail tucked into some town records. Certain guilds required members to maintain respectable winter clothing, not for vanity, but because visible poverty reflected poorly on the trade. A torn cloak could suggest weakness or instability. Warmth and reputation intertwined in ways you would not expect. As you move through the town, you notice how clothing shapes posture. People hunch slightly, shoulders raised, arms kept close. Movement is economical. No one gestures wildly. Every exposed inch of skin feels like a mistake. You tuck your chin down into your collar and understand why people walk this way. Not everyone has equal access to warmth. This becomes clear as you pass someone wrapped in thin, faded cloth, moving quickly to keep blood flowing. Towns did have systems of winter clothing charity, often tied to churches or wealthy patrons, but these resources were limited. There is discussion among historians about how effective such efforts truly were. Some believe they prevented the worst suffering. Others think they barely scratched the surface. Inside homes, clothing often stays on even at night. Sleeping naked is unthinkable in winter. You crawl under blankets still dressed, maybe removing only shoes. Body heat is too valuable to waste. Families sleep close, sharing covers when necessary. Children wedge themselves between adults, absorbing warmth and offering it back. There is also a sensory weight to winter clothing. Wool smells of smoke and lanolin. Dampness lingers longer. When snow finally arrives, it melts slowly into fabric, chilling you from the outside in. You learn to brush it off immediately, stamping feet at thresholds, shaking cloaks before stepping inside. Small habits make a difference. Gloves are rare and precious. Mittens exist, often simple and thick, but many tasks require bare fingers. You feel the sting of cold metal when you touch a latch, the numb ache that follows. People work through it. They always have. Complaining does not restore feeling faster. There is a belief, repeated quietly, that wearing too many layers makes you lazy or weak. Hardiness is admired. At the same time, no one refuses warmth when it is offered. This contradiction lives comfortably in winter culture. Strength is praised, but survival is valued more. As evening approaches, you notice people gathering closer again. Benches fill. Cloaks overlap deliberately now. Someone shifts to make space, without being asked. You feel welcomed in a way that words do not express. Winter strips away formality. Warmth becomes the shared goal. You adjust your own layers one last time, settling into the rhythm of fabric and heat. Clothing creaks softly as you move. The fire glows low. Outside, the cold presses in, But here, wrapped in wool and proximity, you hold it at bay. You realize that winter clothing is not just something you wear, it is something you inhabit, a second shelter, carried with you through narrow streets and long nights. And for now, it is enough. You step back into the market square and immediately feel how winter has thinned it. The open space that once buzzed with voices and movement now feels hesitant, as if the town itself is unsure whether gathering is worth the effort. Snow has not fully claimed the ground, but ice rims the edges of puddles, and every footstep is measured. Only a handful of stalls remain. Canvas hangs stiff with cold, ropes pulled tight to keep fabric from snapping in the wind. The merchants who are here stand close to their goods, not just to sell, but to guard what little they have brought out. Winter turns every item into a risk. Damage from frost or moisture can ruin a trader in a single day. Food dominates what is left of the market. You see sacks of grain, hard loaves of bread, dried peas, and salted fish laid out carefully. Fresh produce is rare now. Roots appear occasionally, turnips and onions mostly, but even these are guarded closely. The colours are muted: browns, greys, pale yellows. Winter eats brightness. Town records from across medieval Europe show that market activity dropped sharply during colder months, sometimes by half or more. Short daylight hours, dangerous roads, and simple exhaustion all played a part. Some towns officially reduced market days in winter, concentrating trade into fewer, more intense gatherings. You feel that pressure in the air. People shop quickly, with purpose. Prices rise. This is not subtle. Everyone knows it. Grain costs more, fuel costs more. Even ale can creep upward in price as brewing becomes harder. You hear murmured complaints, but little surprise. Winter pricing is expected, even if resented. In some places, authorities tried to cap prices to prevent unrest, though enforcement varied wildly. A smaller, stranger practice catches your eye. One stall offers bread stamped with a specific mark. It signals that the loaf meets weight requirements set by town law. In winter, when shortages tempt bakers to cheat, these marks matter more. People weigh bread in their hands instinctively, testing density, comparing cost. Hunger sharpens judgment. There is disagreement among scholars about how often medieval towns experienced true winter famine versus periods of stress that modern readers interpret as crisis. Some argue that storage techniques and trade networks were more resilient than once believed. Others point to repeated winter shortages in written complaints and sermons. Standing here, watching people count coins carefully, you sense how thin the margin really is. The cold affects how people interact. Haggling still happens, but it is shorter, quieter. No one wants to linger. Fingers stiffen around coins. Breath fogs faces, making expressions harder to read. Transactions become practical, stripped of ceremony. You notice how sound behaves differently. Voices carry farther in cold air, but there are fewer of them. The market feels hollow, like a shell of its warmer self. A cart rattles across the square, wheels slipping slightly, and everyone glances over. Accidents here are harder to recover from in winter. There is also an unspoken hierarchy in what sells first. Staples go quickly. Luxuries sit. A bolt of dyed cloth flaps in the wind, ignored. People save coins for what fills bellies or feeds fires. Winter clarifies priorities brutally. A woman nearby buys grain, then immediately pulls her cloak tighter and leaves, as if the transaction itself exposed her to risk. You realize that markets in winter are not social spaces anymore. They are functional nodes. You come, you buy, you go. You overhear someone mention that a road to the south has become impassable after heavy frost. This kind of news ripples through the square quietly. Fewer traders will arrive next week. Prices may rise again. Information is as valuable as goods now. A child slips on ice near the edge of the square and is hauled upright quickly, scolded more from fear than anger. Injuries heal slower in winter. Everyone knows this. Carelessness carries heavier consequences. As you make your own small purchase, you feel the weight of it in your hands, not just physically, but mentally. How long will it last? When can you afford more? Winter shopping is an exercise in foresight. You leave the square with your bundle tucked close, coins lighter in your pouch. Behind you, the market continues in its subdued way, people moving like figures in a slow ritual. Winter has not killed trade, but it has narrowed it, focused it, stripped it down to necessity. As you walk away, the sound of the square fades quickly, swallowed by cold air and stone. You feel the quiet settle again. In winter, even the heart of the town beats more slowly. You break the bread carefully, not because it is sacred, but because it is hard. Winter bread resists you, dense and dark, made to last rather than delight. The crust cracks with effort, crumbs falling onto your lap or the floor without ceremony. You brush them up instinctively. Nothing edible is wasted now, not even fragments. This is the core of winter eating in a medieval town. Calories first, pleasure second, if it appears at all. Bread anchors every meal, often made from a mix of grains that would not be used in better seasons. Rye, barley, oats, whatever could be spared and ground together. The result is filling, heavy, and reliable. You chew slowly, jaw working, feeling warmth spread as your body recognizes fuel. Ale follows. It is weak by modern standards, but safe, nourishing, and ever-present. Brewing continues through winter, though it becomes trickier. Cold slows fermentation, and batches can spoil if not watched carefully. Still, ale provides liquid calories and a sense of routine. You take a sip and feel it settle comfortably, a familiar weight in your stomach. Surviving account books and household records show that winter diets leaned heavily on preserved foods. Salted meat, dried fish, smoked bacon, hard cheese. Freshness is a memory now. Preservation techniques were well understood, though not foolproof. Mold, rot, and pests remained constant threats. Winter, eating involved inspection as much as appetite. There is a small, almost amusing detail that appears in some kitchen notes and sermons. People complained that winter food made them sleepy. Heavy bread, thick stews, and constant ale created a kind of slow haze. This was not always seen as a problem. Sleep conserved energy. In winter, drowsiness could be interpreted as the body doing what it needed to survive. You watch someone stir a pot hanging over the fire. The stew is simple. Beans, onions, maybe a bit of fat if luck allows. It simmers slowly, the smell deepening over time. Winter cooking favors long heat and patience. The same pot might be topped up for days, flavors layering as ingredients come and go. You feel a strange comfort in its continuity. There is discussion among researchers about how varied winter diets truly were across different towns and regions. Some argue that urban centers enjoyed more diversity thanks to trade. Others suggest that for most people, winter food was monotonous and repetitive. Sitting here, eating the same bread again, you sense how repetition itself becomes normal. Hunger dulls the desire for novelty. Spices appear occasionally, but sparingly. They're expensive and often reserved for special days or those with means. When they do show up, even a pinch of pepper or cumin feels dramatic. You notice how people react to it. Eyes widen slightly, conversation pauses. Flavor becomes an event. Meals cluster around daylight and fire availability. Breakfast is late, after the hearth is properly going. The main meal happens when warmth peaks. Evening eating is cautious. You do not want to rekindle the fire unnecessarily. Leftovers are eaten cold or warmed briefly. Every action weighs cost against comfort. You also notice how communal eating shifts in winter. People eat closer together, both physically and socially. Bowls are shared. Utensils pass from hand to hand. This is partly practical and partly cultural. Winter reinforces collective survival. Eating alone feels wasteful when warmth and food are scarce. Children are fed first more often now. Not always, but noticeably. Smaller bodies lose heat faster. You see extra care taken, larger portions nudged toward them quietly. No one announces it. It is simply done. There is an underlying anxiety threaded through every bite. How long until the next delivery? Will stores last until spring? What if the winter is longer than expected? These thoughts surface briefly, then are pushed aside. Worry does not fill stomachs. You hear someone mention a neighbor who stretched flour with ground peas to make it last longer. Another mixed in tree bark during a particularly harsh year. These stories circulate like warnings, reminders of what happens when planning fails. They are not told dramatically. They are told matter-of-factly. As you eat, you feel warmth build, then settle. Your body relaxes in response. This is why winter food is so dense. It gives heat from the inside, something fire alone cannot do. You lean back slightly, eyelids heavy, and let the feeling wash over you. Cleanup is minimal. Bowls are scraped clean, water is used sparingly, grease is saved, bones are set aside for broth. Winter teaches efficiency without lectures. You absorb it naturally. When the meal ends, there is no rush to clear space for something else. Eating and resting blur together. Someone stokes the fire gently. Someone else stretches and settles back down. Conversation softens. You realize that winter calories are not just about survival. They structure time, mood, and movement. They slow you down in a way that feels intentional, even wise. In a season that demands patience, food becomes the anchor. You take one last bite, chew thoughtfully, and swallow. Outside, the cold presses in again, but inside you, warmth holds. For now, that is enough. You reach for water without thinking, then stop. Winter has taught you to pause before simple habits. Water is no longer just there. It must be found, checked, sometimes broken free from ice, and always considered carefully. Thirst exists, but trust does not come easily. In warmer months, wells and fountains are gathering places. In winter, they become obstacles. You step toward a well and see the rope stiff with frost, the bucket rimmed with ice. Someone has chipped at it already, leaving jagged edges that catch the light. Drawing water now takes strength and time. Each pull feels heavier, not just from the cold, but from the knowledge that a mistake could mean losing the bucket entirely. Medieval towns depended heavily on shared water sources, and winter made those dependencies painfully clear. Written regulations from various towns show repeated concerns about keeping wells usable in cold weather. Covers were added. Straw and wood were used as insulation. In some places, guards were appointed to prevent contamination when snow and ice made cleaning difficult. Water was life, and winter threatened it quietly. You watch someone pour water carefully into a container, then tuck it under their cloak. The body heat helps keep it from freezing solid before they reach home. This is not something anyone explains to you. You simply observe it, then do the same later. Winter learning happens through watching. There is a strange taste to winter water. Colder, sharper, sometimes faintly metallic. Pipes, where they exist, are rudimentary and often freeze or crack. Many people prefer water that has been boiled, which leads you back again to ale and thin beer as daily drinks. Fermentation and boiling make liquids safer, and winter makes safety a priority. A lesser-known practice surfaces in colder months. Snow is sometimes collected and melted for water, especially when wells are unreliable. This sounds clean, but it depends heavily on where the snow falls. Town snow absorbs ash, waste, and soot quickly. People argue quietly about whether it is better than well water or worse. The answer changes with circumstance. There is disagreement among historians about how dangerous winter water truly was compared to summer supplies. Some argue that frozen conditions reduced certain contaminants. Others point out that limited flow allowed stagnation to increase risk. You listen to a conversation nearby, half joking, half serious, about which well makes people sick and which one does not. Reputation replaces testing. Bathing is another matter entirely. Winter bathing is rare and cautious. Cold water shocks the body, and heating enough water for a full bath requires fuel most cannot spare. Instead, people wash selectively. Hands, faces, sometimes feet. Cloths are warmed near the fire and used sparingly. Cleanliness becomes targeted rather than complete. You notice how this affects social rules. Strong smells are tolerated more. Dirt is accepted unless it signals illness. There is less judgment and more pragmatism. Winter lowers standards in ways that feel merciful rather than neglectful. Ice creates new hazards. You see a woman step carefully across a frozen patch, testing each movement. A fall can mean broken bones, and broken bones in winter heal slowly, if at all. Town records mention winter injuries frequently, often followed by long periods of dependency or disappearance. You adjust your own pace, learning from others without realizing it. Children treat ice differently. They slide, test, laugh, then get scolded sharply. Play exists, but winter narrows its boundaries. You sense fear under the stern voices. Everyone knows what a bad fall can mean. Water also shapes fire management. You keep a small amount nearby, not for drinking, but in case embers escape. Buckets are positioned strategically. In winter, fires burn longer and closer to flammable materials. Water becomes a silent guard, rarely used, always ready. There is an old belief you hear murmured that cold water can invite illness into the body if taken too quickly. People sip slowly, even when thirsty. They warm cups near the hearth first. Temperature matters as much as purity in winter thinking. Snow begins to fall lightly as you stand watching the well. It changes the sound of the town almost immediately. Footsteps soften, voices feel muffled. Snow promises both danger and relief. It insulates, brightens nights slightly, and provides moisture. It also blocks roads and hides hazards. You feel its weight settling into your thoughts. When you finally drink, it is not refreshing in the modern sense. It is purposeful. You swallow carefully, feeling the cold move down into your chest, then spread. Your body reacts, tightening briefly, then accepting it. You have learned to negotiate even with water now. As evening approaches, water use becomes more deliberate. Less cooking, fewer trips outside. Containers are topped off before dark. You see people counting steps between door and well, estimating effort. Winter turns distance into calculation. You carry your water back inside and set it near the fire, not too close. Steam rises faintly, catching the light. You watch it for a moment, oddly comforted. Even in winter, water still moves, still changes state, still responds. You understand now that access to water shapes everything else. Cooking, health, cleanliness, safety. Winter tightens that access, forcing care where summer allows ease. You adjust without protest. Everyone here has. You sit down, cup in hand, and take another slow sip. Outside, snow continues to fall, reshaping the town quietly. Inside, water waits, patient and essential, as it always has. Darkness arrives before you are ready for it. You glance up, expecting afternoon light, and instead find the sky already sinking into grey. Winter steals hours from the day without apology. The sun lingers low, then slips away early, leaving you to adjust your sense of time whether you want to or not. You feel the change immediately in the town's movement. People quicken their pace, finishing tasks with quiet urgency. Doors close sooner. Shutters are drawn while there is still a trace of light left to see by. You sense a collective decision unfolding around you. Whatever can be done outdoors must be done now, or it will wait until tomorrow. In medieval towns, daylight governed labor far more strictly than clocks ever could. Winter shortened workdays across trades, not by law alone, but by simple limitation. Candlelight existed, but it was expensive and weak. Most people reserved it for essential tasks or special occasions. Darkness meant rest, not leisure. You notice how sound changes as light fades. Voices soften, metal tools fall silent, footsteps echo more clearly in the cold air. The town seems to exhale, settling inward. Winter evenings are not loud, they are contained. There is an interesting note found in some monastic and civic records. Winter darkness was often linked to moral concern. Authorities worried that long nights encouraged misbehavior, idleness, or temptation. Curfews were enforced more strictly in cold months, partly for safety, partly for control. You hear a bell ring somewhere, not urgent, but firm, signaling that the acceptable window for wandering is closing. You light a small lamp and are reminded how little light it gives. The flame trembles, casting more shadow than brightness. You bring it close to what you are doing, hunching instinctively. Reading, sewing, carving, all become intimate acts performed within a narrow circle of glow. There is ongoing discussion among historians about medieval sleep patterns, especially in winter. Some suggest people practiced segmented sleep, resting, waking briefly, then sleeping again. Others argue this varied widely by region and household. What seems clear is that winter encouraged longer periods of rest. Darkness pressed people toward beds earlier, even if sleep itself did not come immediately. You feel that pull now. Your body slows. Muscles relax more readily. The cold outside makes warmth inside feel heavier, more seductive. You sit near the fire and let your eyes follow the movement of shadows along the wall. Time stretches. There is no rush to fill it. Conversation shifts tone in winter evenings. It becomes quieter, more reflective. Stories are told slowly, often repeated. No one minds. Familiar tales feel grounding when days are short. You listen to one now, half paying attention, half drifting, the rhythm of the voice more important than the details. Children fight sleep briefly, then surrender. Adults follow not long after. Staying awake requires fuel and light. both precious. You notice how everyone arranges themselves deliberately before settling in, blankets adjusted, feet tucked closer to heat, tools set aside carefully. Preparation replaces spontaneity. There is fear threaded through winter darkness, but it is subdued. Thieves move more easily now, but so do watchmen. Accidents happen unseen, but neighbors listen closely for trouble. Darkness sharpens awareness as much as it obscures. You lie down, fully clothed, lamp extinguished, and let the room fall into near total dark. Firelight pulses faintly, enough to remind you that warmth still exists. Outside, the town is quiet, held in a shared pause. Winter nights are long, but they are not empty. They are filled with breath, fire, and waiting. You close your eyes and let darkness do what it has always done here. It slows you, it shelters you, it carries you towards sleep. Morning does not arrive all at once. It seeps in slowly, a pale grey light filtering through shutters and cracks, bringing just enough visibility to remind you that the day has begun. Winter mornings feel reluctant, as if the sun itself needs encouragement to rise. You wake stiff and heavy. Sleep has restored you, but not refreshed you. Cold settles into muscles during the night, and it takes time to work it out again. You sit up, stretch carefully, and listen. Somewhere nearby, someone is already coaxing a fire back to strength. That sound, the soft scrape and crackle, signals the real start of the day. Work in a medieval town does not stop for winter, but it does change shape. Outdoor labor shrinks, indoor tasks expand. You notice this immediately as people begin to move about with purpose, carrying tools that favor shelter over open space. Shoemakers, weavers, scribes, and metal workers all adapt their routines to the cold. Records from guilds and town councils show that winter was often the season for maintenance and preparation. Tools were repaired, accounts were reviewed. Apprentices spent more time learning by observation than practice. The pace slowed, but productivity did not vanish. It simply shifted inward. You walk past a workshop where a craftsman works close to a small fire, hammer moving in measured rhythm. Metal cools faster in winter, demanding precision and patience. Mistakes cost more when material is scarce. You see frustration flash across a face, then fade into concentration. Winter teaches restraint. There is a curious seasonal rule you overhear mentioned. Some towns limited certain noisy trades during early winter mornings, not for comfort, but because sound carried farther in cold air. Disturbance complaints increased. Work had to fit not just daylight, but the town's tolerance for disruption. People dress for work differently now. Layers are chosen for movement rather than display. Fingers are wrapped when possible. Breath clouds the air inside workshops until fires catch up. You smell wool, smoke, and effort mingling together. There is ongoing disagreement among historians about whether winter reduced overall economic output in medieval towns. Some argue that productivity dipped significantly. Others suggest that winter work, though quieter, was essential groundwork for spring and summer success. Watching people here, you sense that winter labor is less visible, but no less important. Children contribute more indoors now. They card wool, turn spits, carry messages. Winter keeps them closer to home, under watchful eyes. You notice fewer idle hands, even among the young. Everyone has something to do, even if it is small. Midday comes and goes almost unnoticed. The sun barely clears rooftops before beginning its descent. Meals are timed around fire strength rather than clocks. You eat when warmth peaks, then return to tasks quickly. Lingering feels indulgent. There is fatigue in the air, but also focus. Winter strips away distraction. Without long daylight or social bustle, work becomes deliberate. Each task is done with an eye toward conservation. Energy, time, materials. Nothing is assumed to be replaceable. You feel your own pace adjusting. Movements slow slightly, but become more efficient. You waste less motion. You sit when sitting will do, stand only when needed. Winter work is about endurance, not speed. As afternoon fades, tools are put away earlier than you expect, not because work is finished, but because continuing would cost more than it gives. Fires need tending, light needs saving, bodies need rest. You step back inside as darkness gathers again, hands sore but satisfied. Winter work may not feel heroic, but it is quietly sustaining. It keeps the town alive through its hardest months. You settle near the fire, aware that tomorrow will bring much the same. In winter, repetition is not boredom, it is stability. You hear the animals before you see them. A low shuffle, a snort, the soft scrape of hooves against packed earth. In winter, the boundary between human and animal space thins until it nearly disappears. Warmth dictates arrangements more than custom ever could. You step into a building that smells unmistakably alive. Straw, manure, damp hide, and breath all mix into a dense, steady presence. A cow shifts its weight nearby, steam rising from its flank in the cold air. You are not startled. This is normal now. In a medieval town during winter, livestock often moves indoors, sometimes into the same structures where people live. Historical housing layouts and legal complaints confirm this practice, especially among poorer households. Animals represent wealth, food, and future labor. Letting them freeze outside would be unthinkable. Bringing them in protects them and adds precious heat to enclosed spaces. You feel it immediately. The room is warmer here, even if the smell is stronger. Chickens roost in corners or on makeshift perches. Pigs root quietly near walls, kept under watch. Larger animals are tethered carefully, their movement limited to avoid damage. Every arrangement is a compromise between space, safety, and warmth. There is an old winter saying you hear, muttered with a half smile. Better to smell a cow than to bury one. It captures the blunt logic of the season. Comfort yields to survival, without much debate. Some people believed that animals carried illness more readily in winter when kept close. Others thought their presence balanced household health by warming the air. Surviving medical texts and folk beliefs reflect both ideas, often side by side. The evidence was unclear, and so decisions leaned toward what felt practical rather than proven. You notice how animals are tended more frequently now. Water must be checked for ice. Feed must be measured carefully. There is no grazing. Everything an animal eats has been stored, cut, or preserved earlier in the year. Winter makes dependency obvious. The animals rely entirely on human planning, just as humans rely on them. There is disagreement among historians about how widespread indoor livestock keeping was in larger towns versus smaller ones. Some argue that dense urban centers restricted it more strictly. Others point to archaeological evidence of animal waste in domestic spaces, suggesting it was common despite regulations. Standing here, feeling the warmth and inconvenience at once, you suspect rules bent easily when survival was at stake. Children move confidently among the animals. They know which horns to avoid, which pigs nip, which chickens scatter. Fear is learned early, but so is familiarity. Animals are not pets in the modern sense, but they are not strangers either. At night, the sounds of animals replace some of the town's usual silence. You hear breathing, shifting, the occasional low call. These sounds are oddly reassuring. They mean life continues, heat persists, food remains possible. Cleanliness becomes a daily negotiation. Straw is replaced when it can be spared. Waste is moved out carefully, often frozen stiff by morning. In winter, the cold helps manage smell and decay, even as it complicates removal. Nothing is easy. Everything is managed. You watch someone stroke a cow's neck absently, not out of affection exactly, but familiarity. This animal represents milk in better seasons, calves, manure for fields. Its warmth now is a bonus. You rest your hand briefly against its side and feel steady heat beneath rough hair. It feels grounding. When you return to human space, you carry the smell with you. No one comments. Everyone smells like this in winter. The line between inside and outside, human and animal, clean and dirty, all blur under the pressure of cold. You lie down later, animals settling nearby. Their presence felt more than seen. The air is warmer than it would be otherwise. You pull your blanket tighter and accept the trade. Winter does not allow ideal choices. It allows workable ones. And here, surrounded by breath and warmth, you understand why animals share the season with you so closely. You notice the coughs before you notice anything else. Dry at first, then deeper, rattling slightly in the chest. Winter carries sound well, and illness announces itself quietly but persistently. It moves through the town not as a sudden wave, but as a steady presence, something everyone expects and watches for. Cold air irritates throats and lungs. Smoke fills enclosed spaces for hours each day. Dampness settles into walls, clothing, and bodies. All of it combines into a season where breathing itself feels like work. You clear your throat more often now, aware of the sound it makes, wondering how it is heard by others. Town death records, where they survive, show a noticeable rise in winter mortality, especially among the very young and the very old. Fevers, chest complaints, and general weakness appear again and again in winter entries. Doctors exist, but their reach is limited. Most care happens at home, guided by habit, observation, and hope. You see someone sitting close to the fire, wrapped heavily, face flushed. A bowl of warm broth rests nearby. This is typical treatment: heat, rest, nourishment. Medicines are few and often expensive. What people rely on instead is consistency. Keep the patient warm, keep them fed, keep them from drafts. There is a strange winter belief you hear repeated quietly. Some think sickness comes from cold settling into the body, especially through the feet. Wet shoes are treated with serious concern. You dry yours carefully by the fire, turning them often, feeling oddly reassured when they finally warm. Medical texts from the period show a strong focus on balance. Cold and damp were thought to throw the body off harmony. Winter illnesses were treated with warming foods, heated rooms, and sometimes bloodletting, though opinions differed on its usefulness in cold months. Advice varied, often contradicting itself, leaving families to choose what felt right. There is no agreement among scholars about how effective medieval winter healthcare truly was. Some argue that simple measures like rest and warmth saved lives more often than credited. Others point to the high death rates as evidence of failure. Watching care unfold here, you sense effort more than certainty. People do what they can with what they have. You notice how illness reshapes social behavior. Visits become quieter, shorter. People speak softly near the sick, as if volume itself might worsen symptoms. At the same time, isolation is rare. A sick person is rarely left alone for long. Someone is always nearby, stirring a pot, adjusting blankets, listening for breath. Children are watched closely. A cough in a child draws immediate attention. You see hands placed on foreheads, brows furrowed, murmured prayers offered without drama. Winter teaches vigilance without panic. The smell of sickness joins the winter air. Sour sweat, herbs steeping, stale breath. It is not overwhelming, but it is distinct. You associate it now with certain rooms, certain corners of the town, places where winter presses harder. There is also recovery, though it is quieter. Someone who coughed badly last week now moves more easily. Another sits up for the first time in days. These moments are noted without celebration, but they matter deeply. Survival is acknowledged in glances and small smiles. You feel your own body more acutely in winter. Every ache raises questions. Is this just cold or something more? You rest when you can. You eat when food is offered. You learn to listen to yourself the way others do. As night falls, the sick are settled carefully. Fires are banked to last. Water and broth are kept within reach. The town grows quieter, as if holding its breath collectively. Winter illness is not dramatic most of the time. It is slow, exhausting, uncertain. It teaches patience and attentiveness. You lie down, listening to breathing around you, aware of how fragile warmth and health can be. Sleep comes, not because you are fearless, but because rest itself is part of the cure. When sickness lingers, you notice how quickly practical care gives way to belief. Winter leaves too much room for worry, and people reach for explanations that offer some sense of control. Medicine, prayer, and superstition sit side by side, not in conflict, but in cooperation. You watch someone prepare a remedy near the fire. Herbs are crushed carefully, their scents sharp and comforting. Sage, fennel, maybe a bit of honey if it can be spared. These mixtures are passed down through families, trusted because they are familiar. Whether they heal or not, they signal care, and that matters. Church bells ring softly outside, marking a service for the sick. In winter, religious life leans heavily toward protection and endurance. People pray not just for healing, but for survival through the season. Candles are lit with intention. Names are spoken aloud. Faith fills gaps where knowledge cannot reach. Written sermons from medieval winters often focus on illness as a test or reminder rather than punishment. This framing offers comfort. If sickness has meaning, it can be endured. You hear someone whisper a prayer while adjusting a blanket. Not loudly, not dramatically, it is simply part of the routine. At the same time, older beliefs persist. Charms are hung near beds. Certain words are avoided. Some think speaking openly about illness invites it to worsen. You notice conversations trail off when symptoms are mentioned directly. Euphemisms replace specifics. Winter makes language cautious. There is a curious practice you learn about through quiet observation. People sometimes place iron objects near the sick, believing metal could ward off harmful forces. A knife under a pillow, a horseshoe near the hearth. These items are not discussed openly, but they appear often enough to feel intentional. Medical practitioners exist, but access varies. A barber surgeon might be called for severe cases, bringing tools and advice that inspire both hope and fear. Fees are negotiated carefully. In winter, resources are stretched thin, and medical help becomes another calculation. There is ongoing debate among historians about how medieval people understood the causes of illness. Some emphasize learned medical theory drawn from ancient texts. Others highlight the persistence of local belief systems that operated independently. Watching care unfold here, you see both at work, overlapping, without contradiction. You notice how healing spaces are arranged. Beds are placed away from drafts. Fires are kept steady, not roaring. Light is soft. Noise is minimized. Even without modern understanding, people recognize the need for calm. Winter enforces this naturally. Not everyone recovers. When death approaches, rituals begin quietly. Prayers are said. Possessions are sorted gently. There is less panic than you might expect. Winter has taught people to live close to uncertainty. Grief arrives, but it is contained, folded into the season's weight. There is also skepticism. You overhear someone mutter that last year, the same charm did nothing. Another shrugs and says it cannot hurt. This practical doubt coexists comfortably with belief. Winter encourages flexibility. Certainty is a luxury. As the sick sleep, others keep watch in shifts. Fatigue shows in their faces, but so does resolve. Caring for the ill in winter is demanding, but abandoning them is unthinkable. Community tightens under pressure. You sit quietly, listening to the low murmur of prayer and the crackle of the fire. The air smells of herbs and smoke. Healing here is not a single action. It is a process woven into daily life, shaped by cold, fear, and hope. When you finally lie down, you carry these images with you. In winter, belief becomes another layer of protection, not always effective, not always rational, but deeply human. Sleep takes you slowly, wrapped in warmth, words, and waiting. The cold sharpens everything, even behavior. You feel it as soon as you step outside after dark, the way your awareness heightens, the way you listen more closely. Winter nights change how people move through the town, and with that, how rules are enforced. Watchmen patrol more deliberately now. You hear their footsteps echo on frozen ground, lantern light swinging slowly. Their presence is both reassuring and uneasy. In winter, fewer people are out, so anyone who is visible stands out. Curiosity and suspicion blur together. Town laws do not disappear with the cold, but they bend under it. Petty crimes shift in nature. Theft becomes more about necessity than greed. Firewood goes missing. Food disappears from poorly guarded stores. Court records from winter months often show an increase in these kinds of offenses, paired with surprisingly mild punishments. You overhear someone mention a neighbor caught stealing kindling. The penalty was a warning, not a fine. Everyone understands what desperation looks like in January. Justice does not soften completely, but it adapts. Survival tempers judgment. There is a lesser-known winter rule in some towns. Nighttime curfews were enforced more strictly when snow and ice made streets dangerous. Officially, this was for safety. Unofficially, it kept unrest in check. Fewer gatherings meant fewer opportunities for trouble. You feel the town quiet itself intentionally as evening deepens. Punishments also change with the season. Exposure becomes a serious concern. No one wants to sentence someone to time outdoors in freezing weather unless the crime truly demands it. Stocks and public shaming still exist, but their use drops in deep winter. Mercy is not framed as kindness, but practicality. There is disagreement among historians about whether winter truly reduced crime or simply changed how it was recorded. Some argue that fewer witnesses meant fewer reports. Others suggest that hardship pushed people towards small acts of theft that never reached court. Walking these quiet streets, you sense how much goes unseen. You pass a doorway where a watchman pauses, listening. A muffled argument drifts out, then settles. He moves on without intervening. Not every conflict needs authority. Winter encourages restraint, even among those tasked with control. You also notice how communities police themselves more closely now. Neighbors watch out for each other, not just out of kindness, but necessity. A fire left unattended threatens everyone. A drunk, stumbling in the cold, could freeze before morning. Intervention becomes communal. Fear exists, but it is quieter. Winter dampens bravado. People who might boast or provoke in summer keep their heads down now. Cold humbles everyone eventually. As you return indoors, you reflect on how law in winter feels less like a system and more like a negotiation between order and mercy, between rules and reality. Survival shapes judgment as surely as any statute. You close the door behind you, the latch clicking softly. Outside, the watchman's footsteps fade. Inside, warmth holds, and for now, that is justice enough. Winter reveals who is held and who is left out. You notice it not through announcements, but through small gestures, repeated again and again. A loaf set aside, a door opened a little wider, a bowl refilled quietly. Charity in a medieval town during winter is rarely loud. It works best when it blends into routine. You see it first near the church. People linger longer here in winter, not only for prayer, but for warmth and food. Churches often act as distribution points during cold months, offering bread, soup, or ale to those who need it most. Parish accounts show winter spikes in spending on alms, fuel, and basic provisions, giving increases when suffering becomes visible. You watch a woman receive a piece of bread without comment. No sermon accompanies it. No lecture follows. She nods once and moves on. Dignity is preserved as much as possible. Winter poverty is common enough that shame would cripple the system if it were enforced openly. There is also a quieter kind of charity practiced among neighbors. Extra firewood is leaned against a door in the early morning. A child is invited to sleep closer to the hearth. A shared meal stretches a little further than planned. These acts are not recorded, but they sustain lives just as effectively as official aid. At the same time, winter makes exclusion harsher. Strangers without ties struggle. Beggars are tolerated, but watched closely. Town ordinances sometimes restrict who may receive help, prioritizing locals over newcomers. Belonging becomes a form of currency. You feel its weight now. Being known matters. There is debate among historians about how effective medieval charity truly was. Some argue it created safety nets that prevented widespread winter death. Others suggest it merely softened the edges of an otherwise brutal season. Standing here, you sense both truths. Help exists, but it is finite. Hospitality follows similar rules. Hosting someone through winter is serious commitment. It means sharing heat, food, and risk. You hear of families turning people away not out of cruelty, but fear of running short. Winter forces hard choices that leave no one feeling generous enough. Children without support draw particular attention. You notice them moved between households, absorbed temporarily where space allows. This is not formal adoption, it is survival lending. Come spring, arrangements may change again. There is an old belief that generosity in winter brings favor later. Blessings, good harvests, protection. Whether people truly believe this or simply repeat it does not matter. The belief encourages action when hesitation would be easier. You feel the tension between compassion and calculation everywhere. Every act of giving is weighed. How much can I spare? How long will winter last? No one knows the answer. As evening settles, you see a small group gathered near a fire outside, sharing warmth briefly before dispersing. No one stays long. Resources are guarded, even as they are shared. You return indoors with a fuller understanding of winter survival. It is not just about endurance of cold. It is about social balance. Who is helped? Who is protected? Who is remembered? You lie down knowing that charity here is not idealistic. It is practical, selective, and deeply human. In winter, survival is rarely solitary, but it is never guaranteed either. The bells sound different in winter. You cannot quite explain how, but you feel it every time they ring. The air is denser, colder, and the notes seem to linger longer, stretching out over rooftops and frozen streets. Church bells become anchors in the shortened days, marking time when the sun cannot be trusted to do so. You find yourself drawn toward the church more often now, even if you would not call yourself especially devout. In winter, the church offers more than prayer. It offers light, warmth, and a sense of order. Inside, candles glow steadily, their small flames multiplied by stone walls. The air smells of wax and smoke, cleaner somehow than the streets outside. Attendance rises in cold months. This shows up clearly in surviving parish records, which note larger winter congregations and increased offerings during major feasts. People seek reassurance when survival feels uncertain. Faith provides structure when routine frays. You take a seat on a wooden bench, feeling the chill seep through it slowly. Others sit close, shoulders nearly touching. There is comfort in the shared stillness. Words are spoken softly here. The world feels held at bay by thick walls and ritual. Winter sermons often focus on endurance, humility, and patience. You listen as the priest speaks about perseverance through hardship, using metaphors of darkness and light that feel almost literal now. The language is simple, meant to be understood by everyone. Winter strips away abstraction. Messages must be clear. There is a lesser-known winter practice you notice as candles are lit for the sick and the absent. People light them deliberately, one by one, sometimes naming someone under their breath. This act is quiet, personal, and widespread. Light stands in for presence when people cannot leave their homes. Churches also function as informal meeting places during winter. News is exchanged in murmurs. Who is ill? Who needs help? Who has not been seen in days? This information travels alongside prayer, blending the sacred and the practical. There is discussion among historians about how sincere medieval religious devotion truly was, especially in winter. Some argue fear drove participation. Others believe habit and community mattered more than belief. Sitting here, you sense how motivation blurs. Comfort, tradition, hope, all of it overlaps. The calendar itself changes texture in winter. Feast days and fasts take on greater importance because they break monotony. You look forward to them not just for spiritual reasons, but because they promise warmth, food, and gathering. Time is counted differently now, from bell to bell, from feast to feast. You notice how the church manages warmth carefully. Fires are rare inside, but bodies fill the space, and thick stone holds heat. Doors are opened and closed with care. Drafts are frowned upon. Even sacred spaces bow to winter logic. As you leave, the bell rings again, signaling evening prayer. Its sound follows you down the street, steady and calm. You realize how much these sounds structure your sense of safety. Even when days are short and cold is relentless, the bells promise continuity. You pull your cloak tighter and walk home slowly, the echo of the bell fading behind you. Winter presses in, but faith, whether deeply felt or simply practiced, offers another layer against it. You begin to notice how wintertime is measured less by days and more by occasions. Feasts and fasts rise up out of the cold weeks like markers on a long road, giving shape to a season that might otherwise blur into one continuous stretch of grey. You look ahead to them, not with excitement exactly, but with relief. The calendar matters more now. Religious feast days punctuate winter with moments of abundance, even if modest. A little more food, a little more light, a reason to gather without explanation. These days are prepared for carefully, because getting them wrong feels heavier in winter. There are fewer chances to compensate. You feel the contrast most strongly on feast days that fall deep into the cold months. The smell of better food reaches you early, richer, and more complex than the usual winter fare. Meat appears more often, though portions are controlled. Spices come out from hiding, ale flows more freely. Even those with little try to participate in some way, because exclusion feels sharper when the world is already closed in. Fast days carry their own weight. Winter fasting is harder than summer fasting, and everyone knows it. Cold demands calories, yet restraint is expected. Meals become simpler, portions shrink. The discipline is taken seriously, but not without complaint. You hear muttered comments about aching bones and empty stomachs, followed by quick glances toward the church door. Endurance is admired, but shared suffering is what makes it bearable. Church regulations and household accounts both show careful planning around these days. Extra fuel is saved for feast cooking. Better ingredients are set aside weeks in advance. Winter leaves no room for improvisation. Celebration requires foresight. There is a curious winter custom tied to certain feasts. People exchange small foods rather than objects. A piece of cheese, a loaf, a cup of ale. These gifts are practical and symbolic at once. They say, "I thought of you, and I have enough to share." In winter, that message carries real weight. Scholars continue to discuss how joyful medieval winter feasts truly were. Some describe them as rare moments of release and laughter. Others suggest they were restrained, even somber, overshadowed by cold and scarcity. You sense elements of both. Smiles appear, but they are tired. Laughter comes, but softly. Celebration does not erase winter. It pauses it briefly. Children feel these days intensely. You see their anticipation build, their disappointment on fast days, their careful joy when treats appear. Winter teaches them early that pleasure is seasonal and earned. They learn to wait. Feasts also reshape social boundaries. Invitations matter. Who you sit with matters. Winter gatherings reinforce ties and expose absences. Someone missing from a bench is noticed immediately. Explanations are exchanged quietly afterward. As evening settles after a feast, the warmth lingers longer than usual. Fires are fed generously. Stories stretch out. Sleep comes later, but without guilt. Winter allows this indulgence because it is rare. When fasting resumes, you feel the shift keenly. The contrast sharpens your awareness of your body and the season's demands. Hunger feels colder in winter. Faith asks more when conditions are hardest. You lie down that night thinking about how winter is endured not just through warmth, but through rhythm. Feast, fast, wait, repeat. The pattern holds you steady when the days are short. Outside, the cold continues unchanged. Inside, the memory of shared food and candlelight carries you gently towards sleep. The fire burns low, steady enough to hold back the cold, quiet enough to invite voices. Winter evenings stretch long, and once work and meals are done, something else fills the hours. Stories. Not performances, not planned entertainment, but the slow passing of words from one person to another. You settle in close, knees drawn up, listening. Someone begins a tale you have already heard, and no one stops them. Familiar stories are welcome now. They do not demand attention. They offer rhythm. You find your mind drifting in and out, catching fragments, letting them carry you. Oral storytelling thrives in winter. Long nights, limited light, and close quarters make speaking easier than doing. People repeat legends, saints' lives, local gossip, and half-remembered histories. The truth matters less than the telling. Stories warm the room in ways fire cannot. Written sources from medieval households and monasteries hint at this winter habit. Marginal notes mention evenings spent recounting events or reading aloud. Literacy varies, but listening does not require it. A single reader can fill a room with voices. There is a strange kind of story that surfaces mostly in winter. Tales of extreme cold, lost travelers, miraculous survival. These are not told to frighten, but to reassure. If someone else endured worse, perhaps you will endure this. The logic is simple and effective. You notice how stories adapt to the listeners. Children hear softened versions. Adults hear sharper edges. Elders interrupt with corrections or additions. Memory becomes collaborative. Winter slows time enough to allow this weaving. There is debate among historians about how much medieval social memory relied on oral tradition versus written record. Some argue that winter storytelling preserved local history more effectively than documents ever could. Others caution against romanticizing accuracy. Sitting here, you feel how accuracy is beside the point. Connection is what matters. Gossip slides easily into story. News of marriages, disputes, strange events. Winter amplifies rumor because travel slows and information lingers. A single story can last weeks, reshaped slightly each night. You watch it evolve without anyone quite claiming ownership. The fire pops softly. Shadows shift. Faces glow and fade. Someone laughs quietly at a familiar turn in a tale. You smile without fully knowing why. Comfort does not always need explanation. There is also silence between stories. Long pauses where no one rushes to speak. These moments feel intentional, not awkward. Winter gives permission to sit without filling space. You rest your head back and let the quiet settle. As the night deepens, voices lower. Stories shorten. Endings blur. People drift towards sleep while still listening. The boundary between waking and dreaming thins, and stories slide easily across it. You realize that winter storytelling is not about keeping people awake. It is about easing them toward rest. Words soften the edges of the day, smoothing the transition into night. You close your eyes as another familiar story begins, already knowing how it ends. The sound of the voice blends with the crackle of the fire. Warmth holds. Sleep comes gently, carried on borrowed memories and shared breath. Morning light finds the children first. You notice it in the way they stir earlier than the rest, restless even in the cold. Winter does not stop childhood, but it reshapes it, narrowing where and how energy can be spent. You watch them learn these limits through trial, error, and frequent scolding. Inside, play becomes quieter. Toys are simple and shared. A carved figure passed hand to hand, a bit of string knotted and reknotted. Games rely on imagination more than movement. Children crouch near the fire, careful not to crowd it too much, aware that warmth is not endless. Their laughter is softer indoors, partly from instruction, partly from instinct. Outside play still happens, but it is brief and watched closely. You see children chasing each other across a patch of frozen ground, boots slipping, arms flailing. An adult calls out sharply, not unkindly, reminding them to slow down. A fall now is more than a bruise. Cold stiffens joints, and injuries linger longer. Winter teaches caution early. Town rules often mention children indirectly in winter regulations. Curfews apply to them too. Streets are considered unsafe after dark. Apprentices are expected home earlier. Records show fines levied against masters whose young charges were found wandering late in cold months. Protection and control blur together. You notice how children dress. Layers are adjusted constantly. Sleeves pushed down, caps pulled tight. Clothing is often hand-me-down, patched many times. Fit matters less than coverage. Small bodies lose heat quickly, and everyone knows it. You see a child tugging at a frayed cuff, fingers red, and someone kneels to retie it without comment. Food portions tell another story. Children are watched closely at meals, not always given more, but given earlier. They are encouraged to eat, even when not hungry. Winter hunger can sneak up on them faster. You see bowls nudged closer, bread broken smaller so it feels like more. Care is quiet and practical. Illness weighs heavily where children are concerned. A cough draws immediate attention. You see hands placed on small backs, listening, feeling. Winter sickness takes children easily, and everyone knows families who have lost one to fever or weakness. Fear sharpens vigilance. There is a belief repeated often enough that you notice it. Children are thought to be more vulnerable to cold spirits, drafts, and damp. Whether this comes from observation or tradition hardly matters. The result is the same. Children are kept close to fires, away from doors, wrapped tightly at night. Education changes with the season. Outdoor lessons pause. Indoor instruction becomes more common, often informal. Older children help younger ones. Apprentices spend more time observing than practicing. Winter slows progress, but deepens familiarity. Learning becomes quieter, steadier. You see boredom too. Winter limits freedom, and children feel it keenly. They fidget, they test boundaries, they slip outside when told not to. Adults respond with firmness, mixed with understanding. Everyone remembers being young in winter. The cold presses harder on small patience. Stories told by the fire often shift tone when children are present. Frightening elements are softened, endings are gentler. At the same time, moral lessons are emphasized more clearly. Winter is seen as a good time to shape behavior. Long evenings allow repetition. There is discussion among historians about whether medieval childhood was harsher than modern childhood or simply different. Some point to high mortality and early responsibility as evidence of severity. Others argue that children experienced strong communal care. Watching winter life unfold here, you sense both. Childhood is fragile, but not ignored. You notice how children contribute. They fetch kindling, turn spits, card wool. Their labor is light but valued. Winter pulls everyone into shared effort. Being useful brings warmth of another kind. Pride shows in small faces when tasks are completed. At night, children sleep close to adults, often between them. Blankets are shared. Space is tight. You hear breathing rise and fall in uneven rhythms. Someone shifts, tucking a smaller body closer. Protection is physical. immediate. Winter nights can frighten children. The darkness lasts too long. Sounds carry oddly. You hear murmured reassurances, familiar prayers, repeated phrases meant to soothe. Adults stay awake a little longer when children are restless, even when tired themselves. As days pass, you see children adapt. Movements grow careful. Expectations adjust. They learn winter rules quickly because they must. The season shapes them early, teaching patience, restraint, and awareness of others. You realize that winter, in a medieval town, leaves deep marks on childhood. Not all of them are harsh. Some are grounding. Shared warmth, shared stories, shared effort. These become memories that last longer than the cold itself. You watch a child fall asleep by the fire, head nodding, body finally still. Someone lifts them gently and carries them to bed. Winter continues outside, unchanged. Inside, childhood endures, shaped but not extinguished by the cold. Winter settles most heavily on women, though no one announces it that way. You see it in the rhythm of the day, in who rises first and rests last, in who adjusts and readjusts the small systems that keep a household functioning when cold presses in from every side. The season magnifies work that is already expected, already constant. You notice it in the morning. While others stretch slowly awake, women are already moving. Fires must be stirred, water checked, children roused and dressed before their small bodies lose too much heat. Clothing needs mending more often now. Wool frays under constant wear. Linen stiffens when damp. Needles flash in firelight as repairs happen early and often. Household accounts and legal records make this clear in indirect ways. Winter months show spikes in textile work, food preparation, and fuel management, all tasks that fall primarily to women. These labors rarely appear in praise or payment, but their absence would be catastrophic. Winter exposes how essential they are. You watch a woman manage the hearth with practiced care. She knows exactly how much wood to add, when to stir, when to let it settle. Too much heat wastes fuel. Too little invites cold and sickness. This balance is learned over years, refined each winter. It is invisible expertise, but it holds the household together. Food work multiplies in cold months. Ingredients are harder, denser, more stubborn. Grain must be soaked longer. Dried foods require patience. Stews need watching for hours, not minutes. Someone must be there to tend them, to keep flavors developing without burning precious contents. You see how this ties women to the hearth for much of the day. Laundry becomes a quiet ordeal. Washing does not stop in winter, but it becomes heavier and slower. Water must be hauled and heated. Wet cloth freezes quickly if mishandled. You see garments dried close to the fire, rearranged constantly to prevent scorching. The air fills with steam and damp wool smell. It is exhausting work, and it must be repeated. There is a lesser-known detail found in some town ordinances and household rules. Women were often held responsible for fire safety, even though they did not control fuel supply or housing structure. If a fire spread, blame frequently landed close to the hearth. This pressure adds another layer of vigilance to already demanding days. Caregiving intensifies as well. Winter illness pulls women into near constant attention. They prepare broths, warm cloths, and watch for changes in breath and color. They sleep lightly, waking at every sound. Even when others help, responsibility tends to return to them by default. There is discussion among historians about whether women's winter labor was recognized as work or simply absorbed into expectations of duty. Some argue that medieval communities understood its value deeply, even if they did not name it. Others suggest that normalization erased acknowledgement. Watching the steady, unremarked effort unfold, you sense how easy it would be to overlook what never stops. Pregnancy and childbirth add another layer of risk in winter. Cold weakens bodies, food shortages strain reserves. Travel to helpers is harder. You hear women speak of winter births with particular seriousness. Extra fires are prepared. Neighbors are alerted in advance. Fear is present, but so is preparation. You notice how women form quiet networks in winter. Advice is exchanged near wells and hearths. Supplies are shared discreetly. Someone checks on another without being asked. These connections are not formal, but they are strong. Winter encourages cooperation, where pride would otherwise interfere. Children gravitate toward women more in winter. Cold draws them inward, and women become centers of warmth and reassurance. You see small hands tug at skirts, small bodies pressed close, while work continues around them. Care does not pause for comfort. Comfort is folded into care. Rest is scarce. Even at night, women wake to tend fires, soothe children, or adjust bedding. Sleep comes in pieces. You notice the weariness in faces, accepted without complaint. Winter fatigue is expected. Endurance is admired quietly. There is also resilience here. Women joke softly while working. Stories are exchanged. Songs are hummed under breath. These moments are not escapes, but supports. They make repetition bearable. Winter would crush spirits without them. Some religious teachings emphasize women's patience and sacrifice more strongly in winter sermons. Endurance is framed as virtue. While this can feel burdensome, it also offers recognition of effort, however abstract. You sense both comfort and pressure in these messages. Clothing reflects winter labor. Women's garments are practical, layered, designed for movement and warmth rather than display. Aprons are worn constantly, catching spills and protecting precious cloth. You notice how often sleeves are rolled, tied, retied. Work leaves marks everywhere. There is a quieter form of authority exercised here. Women decide how long stores will last, how resources are allocated day to day. These decisions shape survival outcomes. Even when men control property or trade, winter power often sits by the hearth. You hear arguments too. Tension rises when fuel runs low or food spoils. Winter stress sharpens voices, yet resolution follows quickly. There is no energy for prolonged conflict. Practicality wins. As days pass, you see how women measure winter not by dates, but by conditions. How much wood remains, how often children cough, how often the fire needs coaxing at night. These measures guide action more than calendars ever could. When spring is imagined, it is often women who speak of it first, not with excitement, but with calculation. When laundry can move outside, when animals leave the house, when fires can burn lower, spring represents relief from constant management. You lie down at night aware of how much winter survival depends on this unseen labor. The town's endurance is built on it, layer by layer, task by task. Cold presses in, relentless, but so does effort. Sleep comes slowly. Fires settle. Somewhere nearby, a woman rises quietly to check embers one last time. Winter continues, but so does the work that holds it back. Winter tests men in ways that are often spoken about openly, sometimes too openly. You hear it in the language of endurance, in comments about toughness, in jokes that are only half jokes. Cold becomes a measure of character, and how you respond to it is noticed, remembered, quietly judged. You feel this pressure as soon as you step outside to work. The air bites your face, and instinct tells you to turn back, but you do not. Others are watching. Winter labor carries an expectation of persistence. To retreat too quickly suggests weakness, even if everyone understands the cold is brutal. Men's work shifts with the season, but it does not lighten. Outdoor labor becomes shorter but more intense. Tasks are clustered into daylight hours. Woodcutting, hauling, repairs. You swing an axe and feel how the cold stiffens your shoulders, how breath burns slightly in your chest. Each movement takes more effort than it should. Town records and guild accounts show that winter injuries among men increase in certain trades. Slips, crushed fingers, strained backs. Cold dulls sensation and slows reaction. You see a man shake his hand hard after striking metal, grimacing, then returning to work without comment. Pain is expected. Complaining is not. There is an unspoken belief that winter reveals a man's true nature. Endurance is praised, resourcefulness admired. Those who plan well, who secure fuel early, who keep their households warm, earn respect. Winter success becomes proof of competence. At the same time, failure is remembered. Running out of wood, needing help too often, losing animals to cold. These things follow a man quietly, shaping how others treat him long after winter ends. You feel the weight of this awareness in small interactions, in glances exchanged over fires and tools. Masculinity in winter also carries emotional restraint. Fear is present, but rarely named. You sense it in tightened jaws and shorter tempers. Winter squeezes patience thin. Arguments spark quickly, especially when resources run low, but they burn out just as fast. There is no energy for prolonged conflict. There is discussion among historians about whether medieval masculinity emphasized stoicism more in winter or whether this is a projection from later ideals. Some point to letters and complaints that show men expressing vulnerability openly. Others argue that public behavior leaned toward toughness. Standing among them now, you see both. Fear exists, but it is shared indirectly. Men often take responsibility for tasks that require exposure to cold. Night watches, long walks to secure supplies, repairs to roofs and walls. These jobs carry risk, and risk enhances status. You volunteer for something unpleasant and feel a subtle shift in how others look at you. Approval is quiet, but real. Alcohol plays a complicated role here. Ale and stronger drink offer warmth and camaraderie, but also danger. Winter drinking can dull judgment and increase accidents. You hear warnings mixed with encouragement. A mug is offered after hard labor, then another. Lines are tested carefully. Fathers are watched closely in winter. How they protect children, how they manage anger, how they share food. You see men lifting children onto shoulders, carrying them through icy patches, holding doors against wind. These acts are small, but they matter. Winter magnifies them. There is also helplessness, though it is rarely named. When illness strikes a household, men pace. They fetch supplies, but caregiving often falls to others. You feel the frustration of not being able to fix what cold and sickness break. Silence follows these moments, heavy and unresolved. Work indoors increases too. Men carve, repair, plan. Tools are sharpened, handles replaced, accounts reviewed. Winter is when preparation happens, and preparation is framed as responsibility. You feel satisfaction in finishing a task that will matter later, even if its benefit is distant. You notice how men gather in winter evenings. Conversations circle around practical matters, weather patterns, fuel supply, news from other towns. Talk is subdued but attentive. Information is exchanged carefully because it may decide who thrives and who struggles. There is a lesser-known winter ritual practiced by some groups. Men test endurance through deliberate exposure, brief and controlled, standing outside without cloaks for a short time, working bare, handed longer than necessary. These acts are not universal, but they exist. They are meant to prove resilience, to reassure oneself as much as others. Scholars disagree on how widespread these practices were, or whether they were symbolic rather than common. Watching behavior here, you sense that most endurance is practical, not performative. Cold demands competence more than bravado. Men also carry winter grief differently. Losses weigh heavily when the season feels endless. You see men sit quietly, staring into fires, saying little. Community allows this silence. Words are not always required. Presence is enough. When spring is discussed, men often frame it in terms of work ahead, fields to tend, trade to resume, repairs to finish. Hope is practical, not dreamy. Winter teaches that imagining relief is useful only if it leads to preparation. You lie down at night with muscles aching, hands rough, mind tired. The cold still presses in, but you have met it, at least for today. Masculinity here is not loud. It is measured in repetition. Getting up again, going out again, doing what must be done. Sleep comes heavy and deep. Tomorrow will ask the same of you, and you will answer, because winter demands it. When you think about leaving the town in winter, the idea feels heavier than it should. Distance stretches in your mind, not measured in miles but in risk. Roads still exist, but winter reshapes them into uncertain things, changing daily, sometimes hourly. What was passable yesterday may be treacherous today. You stand near the gate and look out beyond the walls. The land feels muted. Fields lie stiff and pale. Tracks cut through snow or frozen mud, already softened at the edges by wind. Travel in winter begins with doubt. You ask yourself not where you are going, but whether you truly need to go at all. Merchants talk about roads the way sailors talk about seas. Ice in the ruts, drifts in low places, bridges weakened by frost. Town records show winter travel restrictions imposed not out of fear alone, but experience. Too many losses taught communities caution. Leaving in winter means accepting that help may not reach you. You watch a small group prepare to depart. Packs are checked and rechecked, cloaks pulled tight, food counted carefully. There is no casual travel now. Every journey has a reason that justifies the risk. You notice how farewells are longer, quieter. No one jokes much. Horses suffer in winter too. Their hooves slip. Their breath steams heavily. Feed must be carried because grazing is gone. You see someone rubbing an animal's legs to warm them before moving on. Travel is a shared burden between human and beast. There is a little-known practice used by some winter travelers. Bells are tied to packs or harnesses, not for decoration, but safety. Sound helps locate companions in snow and fog. It also warns others of approach when visibility fails. You hear a faint jingle fade as the group moves away, swallowed quickly by distance. Disagreement exists among historians about how isolated medieval towns truly became in winter. Some argue that trade continued steadily along major routes. Others emphasize frequent closures and seasonal isolation. Standing here, watching the gate close behind departing travelers, you sense how fragile connection feels. One storm could cut the town off entirely. Messages slow. News arrives late or distorted. Rumors fill the gaps. You hear conflicting accounts of conditions beyond the hills. One person says the road is clear. Another insists it is deadly. Truth becomes local and temporary. For those who must travel, danger does not always announce itself dramatically. Fatigue sets in quietly. Cold seeps through layers. Wet feet numb, then ache. A wrong step twists an ankle. In winter, small mistakes compound quickly. You understand why people fear being alone on the road more than thieves. Shelter matters as much as direction. Inns are lifelines, but not all remain open through winter. Some close entirely, unable to maintain fires and supplies. Others charge more, knowing travelers have few options. You hear warnings exchanged about which places can still be trusted. There is also kindness on the road. Winter hardship encourages hospitality among those who remain open. A place with a warm fire and a bowl of stew becomes memorable. Stories of such stops circulate widely, gratitude carrying them forward. You notice how winter travel reshapes identity. A traveler is not just someone passing through. They are a risk-bearer. People watch them carefully, noting condition and purpose. A stranger arriving in winter draws more attention than one arriving in summer. Questions come faster. Those who stay behind feel a different kind of strain. Isolation presses inward. Without travelers, towns grow quieter, more inward-focused. News dries up. Curiosity fades into routine. You sense both relief and restlessness in this closed world. Children ask about places beyond the walls more often now. Winter boredom fuels imagination. Adults answer briefly, sometimes deflecting. The outside world feels distant and dangerous. Better to keep attention here. You think about messengers, pilgrims, and the truly desperate, those who travel because staying is worse. Winter does not stop them, but it punishes them harder. You feel respect mixed with fear when such figures appear, frostbitten and thin, carrying news or requests. Night travel is rare and feared. Darkness, cold, and poor visibility combine into something almost mythic. Stories circulate about travelers lost just beyond familiar landmarks. These stories are not exaggerated. They are warnings. As you turn back toward the town, the gate looming solid and reassuring, you understand why winter encourages stillness. Movement costs too much. Staying becomes the safer choice. Inside the walls, fires glow. People gather. Life contracts, but it holds. Outside, roads wait, silent and uncertain, until warmth returns. Winter reaches into the courts just as it reaches into everything else, reshaping how justice feels and how it is applied. You sense the change before you ever hear a verdict. The air inside the hall is cold, breath visible as people speak. Even authority shivers a little in January. Cases still come forward. Disputes do not pause for weather, but their tone shifts. You notice fewer arguments over land boundaries and more over food, fuel, and broken agreements. Winter pressures bring small conflicts to the surface. A borrowed cloak not returned, firewood taken without asking, promises made in autumn now impossible to keep. Court rolls from medieval towns show that winter sessions often dealt with survival-related offences. Theft of necessities appears frequently, and punishments are often reduced or delayed. A fine might be lowered. A sentence postponed until warmer months. Justice becomes flexible not out of kindness, but realism. You watch a man stand accused of stealing bread. His shoulders are hunched, not in defiance, but cold. The magistrate listens carefully, asking questions about family, work, and circumstance. The room understands what is at stake. Bread in winter is not luxury, it is life. There is a belief repeated quietly among townspeople that winter judgment carries heavier moral weight. To punish harshly in cold weather feels dangerous. Even to those who value order, exposure itself is punishment enough. No one wants blood on their conscience when spring arrives. Punishments that involve outdoor exposure are avoided when possible. Stocks stand empty more often now. Fines are preferred, even if they go unpaid for months. In some cases, offenders are ordered to perform labor instead, chopping wood or repairing walls. This serves justice and survival at once. There is debate among historians about whether medieval winter justice was genuinely more merciful or simply more constrained. Some argue that leniency reflects compassion shaped by shared hardship. Others suggest authorities feared unrest if desperation went unchecked. Watching the careful balance here, you sense both motivations working together. Testimony feels different in winter too. Witnesses speak softly, tempers flare less dramatically. Everyone wants proceedings finished quickly so they can return to warmth. Long speeches feel indulgent. Brevity becomes a virtue. You notice how community reputation matters more now. A known troublemaker receives less sympathy. A respected neighbor receives more. Winter narrows tolerance for uncertainty. People want to trust those around them because survival depends on cooperation. There is also the matter of debt. Winter freezes many obligations in place. Payment deadlines are extended. Interest accrues quietly, but collection waits. Records show that creditors often delayed enforcement until after thaw, understanding that winter extraction could destroy future repayment entirely. Women appear in winter courts more often than you expect, usually representing households in disputes over fuel, food, or care. Their testimony is practical and specific. They know exactly how many logs are missing, how many days of grain remain. Winter sharpens memory. Children rarely appear directly, but their presence is felt. Cases mention mouths to feed, sickness at home, the risk of leaving dependents without support. These details influence decisions more than legal theory ever could. There is a strange quietness to winter justice. No crowds gather for spectacle. Proceedings feel internal, almost private. Authority is exercised with awareness that everyone involved will face the same cold once they step outside. You step out of the hall and feel the bite of air again. The judgment rendered inside feels fragile, contingent. It holds only as long as winter allows. In spring, rules may harden again. Walking back through the streets, you reflect on how justice in winter becomes less about ideals and more about survival. Order is maintained not by severity, but by shared understanding of limits. You pass someone you recognize from the court. They nod once, expression unreadable. Whatever was decided inside must now be lived with outside, in the cold. Winter does not erase law. It reshapes it, softens edges, tightens focus. Justice becomes another system, adapted to endurance. You pull your cloak tighter and head home. Firelight waits. For tonight, order holds, fragile and sufficient. You begin to sense the change before you can explain it. Nothing dramatic happens. The cold still bites. Snow still lingers in corners, where the sun rarely reaches. And yet, something shifts quietly in the town's mood. Winter no longer feels endless. It feels long, but finite. You notice it first in the light. Days are still short, but the darkness retreats by minutes at a time. At dusk, there is a faint stretch of grey where night once arrived abruptly. People remark on it casually, almost suspiciously, as if saying it aloud might undo it. Still, you see heads tilt toward the sky more often, checking. Work rhythms adjust almost imperceptibly. Tasks that were postponed are mentioned again. Someone talks about repairing a fence when the ground softens. Another mentions seeds kept dry all winter, waiting. These conversations do not bring excitement yet. They bring planning. Winter allows hope only when it is practical. You feel impatience begin to surface. The routines that once felt stabilizing now feel heavy. Fires are still needed, but you catch yourself wishing they did not need such constant attention. Thick clothing that once felt protective now feels cumbersome. Winter survival has become familiar, and familiarity breeds restlessness. Historical weather records and agricultural notes suggest that late winter was often the most psychologically taxing period. Stores ran low, illness lingered, the novelty of endurance wore thin. You sense that strain now. People speak a little more sharply. Laughter is rarer. Everyone is tired of being careful. At the same time, there is vigilance. No one relaxes fully. You hear reminders spoken aloud. Do not assume it is over. Late frosts are dangerous. Sudden storms still happen. Winter has a reputation for cruelty at the end, when hope tempts mistakes. You watch someone open a door longer than usual, letting in cold air without panic. Another leaves a shutter ajar during the day, craving light. These are small rebellions, not yet reckless, but telling. The town tests the season cautiously. Food stores are counted again. How much remains? How long until fresh supplies might appear? You see adjustments made, portions recalculated. Nothing is wasted now. The last stretch demands discipline. Many winters have ended badly because people celebrated too early. There is an old saying you hear repeated quietly: winter kills in March. Whether it is true or not, it shapes behavior. People remember years when late cold ruined plans and lives. Memory keeps caution alive. Animals sense the change too. You notice restlessness. Chickens shift more. Larger animals snort and stamp. They feel lengthening days, even if snow remains. Their feed is nearly gone. Caring for them feels more urgent now because the end is in sight. Children ask questions about spring more openly. When can we go outside longer? When will animals leave the house? When will washing go outside again? Adults answer carefully, not wanting to promise too much. You hear phrases like, soon, maybe, we will see. There is discussion among historians about whether medieval people marked the end of winter emotionally or ritually. Some argue that calendars and feast days structured anticipation clearly. Others suggest that practical conditions mattered more than dates. Watching the town now, you sense that thaw is measured by feeling as much as by time. Church services begin to include language of renewal, light, return, preparation. These words feel less abstract now. Candles burn a little brighter. Hymns linger longer. Faith shifts tone subtly, from endurance to expectation. You notice how people clean differently. Floors are scraped more thoroughly. Old straw is replaced more often. Tools are checked with intent rather than maintenance. Preparation replaces preservation. Winter survival slowly gives way to readiness. Yet winter still demands respect. A sudden cold snap reminds everyone not to rush. Fires are stoked higher again. Cloaks come back out. No one complains much. This has happened before. Hope does not erase memory. You feel yourself caught between two instincts, relief and caution. You imagine warmth without needing fire. You imagine walking without fear of slipping. But you also remember how much winter still holds. You move carefully, as everyone does. Evenings feel different now. Stories drift toward the future rather than the past. Someone mentions a journey planned after thaw. Another talks about repairs delayed too long. These are not fantasies. They are commitments waiting for permission. Sleep changes too. You wake earlier, sometimes before light, mind already moving ahead. Winter taught you patience, but now patience feels like waiting at a closed door you know will open soon. As you sit near the fire one evening, you realize that winter has reshaped you. You move differently. You plan differently. You value warmth, food, and company more deliberately. These habits will not vanish with the snow. They will linger, shaping how you meet the rest of the year. Outside, a drop of water falls from an eave, then another. The sound is soft, rhythmic. It does not mean spring has arrived. It means winter is loosening its grip. You listen for a long time, letting the sound settle into you. The cold remains. But for the first time in weeks, it does not feel like the only truth. You pull your blanket closer, not from fear, but habit. The night passes quietly. Somewhere between sleep and waking, you understand that endurance has worked. You are still here. Winter is not finished yet, but it is no longer the future. You begin to imagine spring long before it arrives, not as a season you can touch yet, but as an idea that keeps you steady through the last stretch of cold. Winter has not released its grip, but it has weakened just enough for thought to wander ahead. You notice how often conversations drift there now, not with excitement, but with care. People speak of spring the way one speaks of something fragile, something that could be delayed or damaged if handled too roughly. No one celebrates yet. They prepare themselves to wait a little longer. The town still wakes to frost. Fires are still essential. Cloaks are still pulled tight each morning. And yet, the way people move has changed. There is less huddling, more stretching. You see shoulders roll, backs straighten slightly, bodies sense what minds hesitate to trust. You walk through streets that look much the same, but feel subtly altered. Snow piles shrink at the edges. Ice retreats from doorways that once stayed slick all day. The ground remains hard, but it no longer feels hostile at every step. Winter is stepping back, 1 inch at a time. There is evidence in household records that this period was the most carefully managed of all. Supplies are at their lowest. Energy is worn thin. Decisions made now matter deeply. A single mistake could undo months of careful survival. You feel the tension in every choice. People speak more often about what they will do first when warmth returns. Not dreams exactly, but priorities. Fix the roof, let the animals out, wash everything properly, sleep with windows open. These thoughts are practical, almost mundane, but they carry enormous weight. They represent release. You notice how tools are arranged now. Items that have sat unused all winter are brought closer to hand. Others are set aside, no longer needed daily. The household reorganizes itself quietly, anticipating a shift that has not yet arrived. Children feel this moment keenly. Their patience is thinner. They linger near doors. They ask more questions. Adults respond with gentle restraint. Almost there. Not yet. Winter has taught them that rushing is dangerous. There is discussion among historians about whether medieval people felt hope differently than modern people do. Some suggest hope was more cautious, shaped by experience of loss and unpredictability. Others argue it was just as vivid, but expressed through action rather than words. Watching this town now, you sense hope in behavior more than speech. The church calendar begins to align with this feeling. Themes of renewal and preparation grow stronger. Fasting feels purposeful now, rather than merely endured. Feasts feel anticipatory, rather than compensatory. Ritual and season move closer together. You notice how people clean themselves more thoroughly when water allows it. Faces are washed longer. Hair is combed more carefully. These acts are small, but they signal readiness to re-enter a wider world. Animals grow restless. They press toward doors. They react to sounds beyond walls. Caring for them feels more urgent, but also more hopeful. They too are waiting. Even illness feels different now. Coughs linger, but fear around them softens. The belief spreads quietly that bodies recover more easily when light returns. Whether this is true or not, it changes how people endure. You feel yourself loosening habits you learned in winter, not abandoning them, but adjusting. You still conserve, but you breathe a little easier. You still plan, but you allow yourself to imagine comfort without calculation. Night falls later now, though the difference is small. Still, you notice it. Everyone does. Lamps are lit a little later. Stories begin later. Sleep comes more gently, no longer forced by darkness alone. You stand near the gate one afternoon and look outward again. The road still looks uncertain, but not impossible. You imagine footsteps beyond the walls, voices arriving rather than leaving, news coming in rather than drifting away. There is a moment, brief and quiet, when you realize winter has done its work. It has tested systems, habits, relationships. Some have held, some have failed. You have adapted. The town has adapted. That is enough. You return indoors as evening cool returns. Fires are still fed, blankets still shared. Winter has not vanished, but it has lost its authority. It no longer defines everything. You lie down that night with a strange calm. Not excitement, not relief exactly. Something steadier, confidence born of endurance. You know now what cold demands, and you know you can meet it. Outside, the town settles into sleep one more time under winter's watch. Inside, you carry warmth not just from fire, but from the knowledge that you lasted. Spring is not here yet, but it is no longer a story told by firelight. It is a certainty waiting its turn. The night grows quieter now, as if the town itself senses there is nothing left to prove. You lie still, wrapped in layers that no longer feel heavy, only familiar. The fire has settled into a deep, steady glow, no longer crackling loudly, just breathing softly in the corner of the room. Outside, winter lingers, but it does so gently. The wind has lost its sharp edge. The cold presses less insistently against the walls. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, the sky is slowly turning, preparing for a season that will arrive whether anyone is ready or not. You think back over the weeks you have lived here. The smoke, the darkness, the careful counting of food and fuel, the shared warmth, the quiet generosity, the unspoken rules that kept everyone moving forward. None of it felt easy, but none of it feels wasted either. Winter taught you how much can be done with very little, and how much strength lives in routine. Breathing slows, muscles loosen. You are no longer listening for danger, only for reassurance. The sounds around you are steady and known. A shift of blankets, a soft sigh, the distant creak of wood adjusting as temperatures change. These are not alarms, they are lullabies. Your thoughts drift without effort now. There is no need to plan, no need to watch the fire so closely. Others will tend it if needed. For tonight, you are allowed to rest. Imagine the town as it sleeps, fires glowing behind thick walls, people breathing in rhythm, animals settling, the roads beyond the gates quiet and empty. Everything held in a long pause, safe enough, warm enough, alive. You let that image blur at the edges, details soften, the cold becomes distant, the firelight fades into a gentle warmth behind your closed eyes. Sleep comes not as collapse, but as release. You have done enough. You have endured enough. The season is turning, and so are you. Stay here in this moment, weightless and calm. Let the medieval town fade into dream, its winter finally loosening its grip. Sweet dreams.